Welcome, beloved, to the Tending the Roots podcast, where we explore the frontier lands of new culture creation. I'm your sometimes host, Karine Bell, and along with the co-dreamers and friends of the Rooted Global Village, we'll be in conversation, exploration, and play with changemakers, scholar activists, and teachers dedicated to culture change work and seeding futures. All right. So Heidi, what were you up to last night? Hi.
Happy Day of the Dead, everybody.
Happy Day of the Dead to you. Yes, everybody. I'm so curious what you got up to last night.
So last night was November 1st, and here in Missoula, there's a few different events happening for this time of year, which is really fun and exciting. And there is a dance space that's new that opened up in Missoula that's called Groundswell. And it's 2 hours of curated music or an hour and a half of curated music, and it's all about play. And it's non-verbal. It's a non-verbal space, and it's a sober space. So last night I was getting ready to go to this groundswell class, and I get in my car and my headlights won't turn on, and it's like 7:30. I'm already late. So I go to my neighbor, he comes over, his dad's on the phone with him, and we're all talking about my headlights, and we realize that I have to get to this class with only high beams and that my regular beams. And I'm like, am I going to get pulled over by the cops? What's going to happen? And I just go for it and I drive there. It was just very ghetto with just my high beams on.
Blinding everybody as you're driving
Blinding.
past them. Like, sorry.
Exactly. And somehow nobody flashed their high beams back at me. So I just scooted on through. I don't know how that worked because my regular headlights were burnt out. And I got there and I was there late. She was doing a beautiful land acknowledgement and burning some sage. And then we just all started to engage in this play. And there was like sensuality involved and consent. And a lot of people are starting to get more and more training in contact improvisation, which I can talk more about. And so you're coming in and out of contact with people if it's consensual. There's people in wheelchairs moving and learning how to dance with people in wheelchairs and dance and move with people who have different limitations to other people. Men, women, trans, non-binary, all different kinds of people and colors of skin and race and culture.
Wow.
So it's a new space. It's not always comfortable. And I think we are learning how to be weird together, make faces, express love and kind and careness and touch and sensuality and sexuality. And also what a lot of times this society can deem as ugly or monstrous, to just
Yeah.
just kind of be freakish together as well and let some of these other energies out and through us in a safe space. And I just thought of this talk with you so much all night last night, and also the drive home thinking of the ancestors. And I think the ancestors, they love music and they love dance. And when I've been in sacred space with the global village, like with Alexa Garcia,
Alexa, yeah.
and talking about future ancestors, I've really seen the future ancestors in celebration so frequently, and like they're calling for us to come toward them in celebration and in play. So those were all of the things that I went through last night and experienced, and thinking of what an honor it is to be here with you in this space and connecting with you in this time and with the ancestors in this time, and also in this time of such deep grief and what's
Yeah.
happening on the planet with genocide.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to still, even within that, let ourselves play. In that, in the space last night, we had tears and people crying, and we also had play.
Yeah.
So those things can exist simultaneously.
I love everything that you just said. And I just want to absolutely resonate with you, what you just shared about the grief that's present in the world right now, the rage that's present in the world right now around what's happening, the genocide that's happening. And also there's play, and also there's celebration. And, I'm so curious if we could touch on that. And then what you just said sparked so many other things for me too. And I'd love to just spend a little bit of time. I have some questions. I'm so curious about this groundswell space in general. But I'm wondering about the necessity of celebration and play, and what that allows us to do, like what it allows us to potentially even be in touch with or to move in ways that we might not otherwise. When I think of what's happening right now in that part of the world, there is this overwhelm. I know that a lot of people feel this. And I listen to endless conversations about it because I'm so curious about how people are thinking about it, the narratives that they tell about it. I'm so kind of obsessively curious about how we're going to find each other in dialogue around something like this. And yeah, I think the rage and the grief are such powerful forces that they can become prohibitive of us actually finding each other in relationship in a way that would lead to some more empathy and understanding. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, when you're talking about play and celebration, what role do they have to play in possibly making room for this? This is kind of where my thinking is going, and I'm wondering what you think about that.
Oh, so many things. It's so rich, beautiful. A few things come to mind. So, in terms of some of the energies that are harder for us to grapple with and process as a collective, like anger and rage, um, I think when we add a little bit of play and humor to those energies, it does allow for them to come out, I think, more safely and in a way that's not projecting on anyone. In my experience with my own rage and process of transformation of rage, is underneath the rage there's a lot of hurt.
Yes,
I
yes.
feel like that rage and that anger comes from our boundaries being crossed or terrible things happening to our ancestors that should have never happened.
Yeah.
So it's there for a reason. But it's a really scary energy. And I think a lot of cultures in the past had more ritual and ceremony to let some of those energies out. Yelling, making sounds that are strong, like we've done in some of our rooted um, workshops together. Bear sounds, I call them monster sounds, but really allowing these sounds and energies to come through, and the wailing.
Yeah.
And if we can add just a little bit of a tinge of this softness and play to it, the energy still gets to come out and it still gets to be released.
Yeah.
But we're adding in this layer, I think, of like protection for self and other. That feels really important to me. So
Heidi, do you
that's
know
one
this?
thing.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to ask you a question about that.
Go for it, because the next thing doesn't have to do with that. So go for it.
Well, I'm actually curious. There are, of course, cultures that still have practices that do allow for this contact with these what feel like impossible, huge, very big emotions, right? And I'm the one that I go back to again and again is the Maori haka. Um, and I'm not sure if you've ever, yes, yes, Heidi, for those who are listening, is sticking her tongue out and making this face. But absolutely, right? And for those listening, I don't know if Heidi, if you've ever seen some of these videos. There's this one on YouTube that I will occasionally just watch because it helps me connect with the energy, the primal energy, right?
Yes.
That is involved in the
Yes.
face of such extreme loss. And the things that we
Yes.
are that are literally out of our control. As much as we would like to hold on, they are out of our control. And there's this gorgeous video. It's only a few minutes long, and I think it was this the school that had lost a beloved faculty member, and they are bringing the hearse with the body onto the school grounds. And as it's driving through the driveway, it's met by this group of students, both Maori and European descended students, and they're all standing there facing this hearse, and they start to perform the haka. And it is all the things you said. It is powerful. It is beating of chests. It is darting of tongues. It's like that face, that raw, primal, animal kind of expression on the face. And they're doing this for a while. And they're beating their chests and they're stomping their feet. And then all of a sudden, it's the most moving thing in the world. I could cry just thinking about it. All of a sudden, they stop, they take a step back, and they kind of part, kind of like the sea parting, right? They kind of like move to the sides of the road that they're standing on, and they bow their heads and they let the hearse drive by. But it's like before they can move into a place of acceptance and surrender, they have to move through the confrontation. It's like this confrontation with what is just not okay. It just doesn't feel okay. I'm mad, I'm hurt, I'm sad. And I have to move that before I can get to the place of surrender and acceptance that says this is just how it is, right?
My little dog Peanut is in the background.
Oh, I was wondering who that was. Hi, Peanut. You trying to get on this conversation?
He's like, I can hear you talking about animal sounds. Oh, what a beautiful story.
It's a gorgeous, I would, maybe we'll put it in the show notes for anyone who's interested in checking it out, but it's a powerful
Yes.
example of what we're talking about.
I've also never been to Africa. And Africa is a continent, of course, but I have some friends who've gone over and participated in the ceremony. That sort of energy, I think, is also allowed and supported in ways that my culture does not have, other than football games.
Mm. Yeah.
Seriously, though, I think a lot of people like the football games because you can access that energy and you can yell and go for your team and go against something. But I do think that there's something really powerful about creating space for the energy to be let through where there isn't competition involved. And
Yeah.
you're directly connecting to consciously a little bit to what you're doing and what you're releasing.
Absolutely. You were saying earlier about this event last night, that it's a dance space and it's also a play space. And I'm so curious, would you always consider dance a form of play?
Well, this also kind of wraps back around to one thing I was going to say earlier, which is that movement as a form of play and dance and sound is also allowed in this space. I feel it as just a different form of communication than verbal. So that's one thing. I think they're connected, but there is something that occurs when you really stop talking. And we do this in Rooted when we do our dances with one another and we're looking at one another and we are communicating. We're communicating with hips and butts and breasts and sweat and our passion and our heart and our fire and there's so much that's communicated through nonverbal
Yes.
spaces as well, and characters that can come out and faces that we can make with one another. It's just it's a different parts of regions of the brain are activated with that and the body. So that I just wanted to bring through. Do I think movement is always a form of play? No, no. Which probably brings us to like, what is play?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but first of all, just to honor what you said about the nonverbal part of that and how necessary it feels to have spaces where we can be in contact with the language of the nonverbal. I know how hungry I am for that, and it does feel challenging. I think there's maybe a tendency towards, I mean, in general, in the culture, a primacy of words, right? That words are more valued than other forms of communication. And
Correct.
given the virtual nature of the way that we often gather, and of course, yeah, at least as it was in during the pandemic, and as it still is in some spaces that rely on this technology, we're grateful for it. And at the same time, it's very word dependent. Even right now, we're relying a lot on words because people are likely listening as they're going about their days. And saying that, I so appreciate um the spaces and the people like you, like Weena, like a lot of people in Rooted who deeply value the expression of the body and through the body. Because you're right, there's a somatic narrative that we're not is not often available to us in a cognitive way, that we
Right.
can't articulate or even put language to, but
Yeah.
that the body knows and
Yeah.
can, and when we can allow it to like, be expressed in that way, um, it's so illuminating, isn't it? It's so illuminating around like what our experience is. I had this one. I wanted, maybe I'll tell this story another time actually, but I had an experience during a five rhythms class. I don't know if you're familiar with five
Oh,
rhythms.
yes.
Should I tell it really quick?
Yes, please. I love
Well,
five rhythms. It was a huge part of my like initiation into movement, Gabrielle Roth.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so. I have very little experience, I'll admit. I was in Edinburgh, Scotland for a somatic experiencing training. And I went with this group of students. They had all been training together for 3 years, and I came in at the end in the advanced year just to finish the training with them. And so they said, well, what we tend to do is we go to a five rhythms class in the evening. Do you want to come? And I was like, okay, sure. I didn't even know what it was. So I was, yeah, just curious. And I show up and I'm looking around this space, and I'm a biracial woman. I'm from, originally from Chicago, so I have a very U.S. kind of centric lens. At least at the time, it's been since challenged. But I think my whole orientation around race had been heavily dominated by a U.S. centric discussion of race, right? The dialogue and discourse on race was very U.S. centric. Um, and I say that because I walk into the room and my immediate feeling was like, there are no people of color in this space. I'm immediately uncomfortable, right? Um, and then on top of that, there were like, it was a very beautiful space. There were candles lit and there was a lot of kind of flowy, kind of new agey looking outfits. And I'm going to be honest and say I was very judgmental in that moment. I was like, this is some bypassy shit that I
Yeah, there
am
is a
not
lot of
interested
bypassy
in.
stuff in the I know,
Well,
it's gnarly.
but what was really interesting for me was this. I say this also because I called myself in that moment too, to notice the way that I had set up. I noticed the way that I was setting up this experience, by applying all of these lenses to the moment that was then creating the very barrier that I was experiencing to actually just be there present in the moment in my body, hear the music and let the music move me.
Yeah.
I recognized it and I said, you know what? I'm just going to feel the music and see what happens now. So I dropped all of that away. I just let it all go. All of the
Mm,
judgment I had, all of these evaluations that were kind of swirling around in my head. I let them all go. And when I did, of course, what happened was I was cracked open, right? And I started to be able to really be present in my body. And then I could see people. I wasn't seeing people before. I was objectifying them. Um, applying some label that I had in my head about who they might be. And as soon as that fell away, I could see them. And we started to have our inner, I love five rhythms. I love the experience of it and how you can kind of be in your own experience of movement and dance. And then you can be in a conversation with another body for a moment. And what happened was there was another woman in the space, and I don't know what brought us to this place, but all of a sudden the two of us were no longer human. We were two tigers in a jungle. We were two wild cats. Yes. And we were snarling and we were growling and we were like grasping and not clawing to, we weren't that vicious, but we were chasing each other around the room. And
Yes.
it got really wild, Heidi. It got really wild. And honestly, it was so beautiful. And then it followed its own kind of arc of progression, right? Its own trajectory. At one point, it kind of climaxed and there was a lot of intensity. And then we naturally began to settle and grew calmer and calmer and then moved into another rhythm. And I found that to be one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had in a space like that. I'm so grateful. I'm especially grateful that I could drop the kind of framework of reference that I had when I first walked into the space that said, this is that, and that is that, and this person is like this, and that is like, you know, all the ways that we already predetermine who people are and what this is going to be, and therefore the experience I'm going to have. I let it all go.
So yeah, the one thing I was thinking right as you went into the story is I wrote down creating new possibilities, and it's something that improv just does. It doesn't matter if it's movement or comedy or music, and with a group or another person, it allows for new pathways to open up. And I do think and feel and experience, I don't know if you have this experience, but colonization and what it's done to our brains and psyches and bodies, all of us, I think. Some of the toxicity, that residual toxicity, is in shame, and it's also in just being so judgmental. And I think all of us experience it. I experienced it when I walked into Groundswell last night. I do not think Groundswell is the only space where judgment can be broken down. I think ayahuasca can do that. I think mushrooms can do that. I think theater can do that. I think lots and lots of, I mean, I think even taking a hike in the woods with your friends can do that. There's lots of things that break that down for us, even yoga. But the point is, or one of the points is just that to be able to allow those judgments and criticisms and shaming of ourselves and of others to release for a moment so that we can have access to different forms of relating and communication, and not then continuing to colonize each other.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where communication can open up. Like you said, that's where we get to see each other. And I think potentially all of us at our core really need to be seen.
Absolutely. I would love to stay with this a little bit more, maybe even deepen it, but maybe you mentioned improv in the beginning, and of course, like many other things that you mentioned that have the potential to open us up to new possibilities. And what I love what you're saying, at its heart, that's what we're really interested in doing, right? That's what I'm hearing. Is we want to know what else is possible, what otherwise experience could we be having of ourselves and of each other and of this world that we're living in that has been so dominated by a very colonial paradigm for so long, right? And it's created divisions. It's created barriers between us. And these barriers have become habituated in our experience, and we just perpetuate them over and over again. If we don't have these opportunities to have something cracked open. I mean, I talk about it like that quite a lot. I've had so many experiences in my life, and every single time I have them, I am so endlessly grateful that something came in to crack me open and show me where I was holding a perception of myself or another person, for example, that was creating a barrier between me and them, or creating a barrier or holding my heart captive. That's what I would usually say. It's
Mm,
holding my heart captive. I cannot love you if I can't see you. I cannot truly meet you as you are if I'm only seeing you through a particular lens. And there's something that feels so it's so heartbreaking, that idea that I can't allow myself to experience you and the depth and mystery of who you are because of this barrier. So every time it's shattered, I used to say it all the time. I love it when my perceptions are shattered. Love it. I will die on that hill. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Even when it's painful, even when it's embarrassing for me, I love it, because then I get to love you. And that's all I want. That's really all I want.
yeah, me too. Yeah, I do think words and poetry and speaking with words also has that capacity. I'm thinking of times, and I've been a part of Tending the Roots, and a speaker will come on, and I'll start with an initial judgment about them, and then I just stay and I sit with it, and they say things, their poetry, their stories, storytelling, that also has that capacity to crack um, our hearts open. And I feel also that for me, this is a path of love, and trying to understand what is love, and how can I truly see all people as much as I can for who they really are, without my own projections onto them. Because it's these projections. No, it's funny because no one likes them being put onto them. Really.
Facts. Even when they're positive. Even when they're
Even when they're
positive.
positive, it starts to get weird. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I can just speak for myself here, but when they're positive and they don't feel like it's not rooted in actually knowing me or who, you know what I mean? And I don't mean like um that we have to be close friends, but some
Yeah.
experience of me. I hate being on a pedestal. I hate it when I'm on a pedestal. Because I feel like we've lost each other in some way. And just like the negative perception, I feel like I'm not being seen truly for who I
Yeah.
am. And I long for that, right? I long for that experience. So I just want to, yeah, add that to what you're saying, which is really powerful.
And I think um, with adding in the body and somatics and also the voice, or music, into music is then a whole nother form of communication. It's activating different parts of the brain.
Yeah.
Um, and I think with all these that we're talking about, movement improvisation, we haven't talked about theater, but theater improvisation, which is could be comedy improvisation, music, all of these things, I feel they're helping us access a fuller range of ourselves. Um, Maybe some more, like you were saying, primal parts of ourselves that I think scare us a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
like you were talking about earlier, these forces, these energies feel like they're out of our control, and we're so scared of being out of control. And I think of, like, how can we let go of control but still maintain our ethics and our awareness?
Mm.
Um, for me, those are different: awareness and control.
Can you say more about that?
When we're maintaining control over ourselves, we tend to then control others. That can tend to perpetuate shame, because if there's parts of ourselves that we have that are like being repressed, then those parts go into the shadow of ourselves and we don't see them. And then we can project that onto other people. So being able to, but we are scared of these big energies. We're scared of sexuality in general. We're scared of the other gender. We're scared of the other race. We're scared of these aspects. If we can slowly find ways to let them out in safe spaces without any shame, let go of control, but maintain awareness so that these energies aren't hurting one another and we're still able to have some dialogue around impact, then we can find, I think, together as a collective, new ceremony, new myth, new ways of releasing things that we need to release, expressing parts of ourselves that have never been expressed, and therefore coming into relationship with one another in new ways that
Yeah.
we haven't experienced before. And it opens up the range of possibility to even talk about who we are.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really beautifully said, Heidi. Really, truly beautifully said. I love that idea of it expanding the range of possibility. Isn't that at heart what we all would love to? Maybe this is a projection. So for folks listening, maybe this is not something that is um, something that you've considered, but I love that as a contemplation. What would it be like if we had a fuller range of possibility for who we could be,
Yeah.
who who we could become?
Yeah.
Um, that for me is the heart of what we're doing. I'm so curious to hear more from you about maybe your own experience with improv in that sense. And you could speak of it in improv in all of these different ways, right? You said musical improv, there's movement improv, there's all these different ways that improv seems like this kind of um it's describing what feels to me, and this is not a definition I've heard, so please you can help me with this, but it feels like it's describing this kind of moment of encounter with authenticity. I don't know how else to say that. Um, and it can be manifest in various forms, like you're talking about. I've personally have realized I'm in clown school for those who are not familiar, and we don't have to go too deep into that right now. But there's a lot of improv in clown school. In
Oh,
clowning, we had to sing a solo in class last week.
no
We had to,
way.
yes, and no preparation. We had to sing,
Yes.
yes, sing a solo on our shame. We had to sing our shame in front of the whole class. Yes, we had to sing our shame. So, when you think of things that scare
Wow.
you in the night, singing one's shame in a solo performance in front of people who you don't know very well is, maybe up there on the list in terms of frightening things. It's not an easy thing to do, and yet the invitation is so compelling to me. And I don't want to go too deep into that. I really want to hear from you and your experience of improv in this way. Like, what has it opened up or shifted or made possible for you? Because I think you called it scary a few moments ago. It's scary to kind of be in this maybe new relationship with the energies within us,
Right.
beyond control of them.
Right.
So what has that experience been like for you?
Um, First, I just want to add in that I think it must have been 10 years ago. We've had some parades for the Day of the Dead here in Missoula. And um, I think 10 years ago, I dressed up as shame
Oh, wow.
for the parade.
Hmm. What did that look like, if you don't mind me asking?
She was red and pokey and kind of a monster. So shame just feels like such a huge part of this conversation, and it's such a painful thing inside of the body. I think it also is camouflaged by our judgments of other people. So our personal shame can rise up inside of us. And instead of like acknowledging it as our own, we just immediately start judging and criticizing other people. And it's inherited. So it's old. So improv for me, which I started doing in college explicitly,
Mm.
um, I started doing as movement improv, and then I did contact improv in certain classes. It it works kind of like ayahuasca. I've done ayahuasca quite a few times. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but it somehow it helps relax the controlling parts of the brain and allows for the beginning of exploration to occur and to let go of that shaming voice and that controlling voice that's inside of us that has been a part of the conditioning of this society so that we can be a little weirder, be a little bit more animalistic, let some of the anger out. It's going to be different for everyone. Um, for some of us, it might be to be quieter. For
Mm.
some of us might be very quiet, and so it might be to be able to feel freer to let the energy of anger out. Some people might be angry, and it might be to contact our gentleness, our femininity, our access to touch. Um, and the other thing I was thinking of is I can imagine you and I encountering each other the first when you and I meet in person for the first time, when that happens, which I cannot wait for that day.
Oh, me too.
Um, you know, in our society, normally we'll see each other, we'll shake hands, we might hug. So in a situation with contact improv or a vocal improv, I might walk up to you and I might go, ooh, and then I'll see what you do. And then you might make a sound and move, and then I'll follow you. And then we find a conversation together that we've never ever had before. And that
Mm.
it's just so precious.
Mm.
Um, and that really does allow for this recreation of different neural pathways that are also inside of the nervous system, which open up our capacity to respond to life as well instead of reacting in these predetermined kinds of ways.
Yes.
And with like, the silliness, allowing for this silliness so that we don't feel ashamed for moving our elbows or making a sound. I mean, these things are not shameful or sinful, or moving our pelvises close to one another, getting up close and exchanging our sexual energy with one another without it then having to turn into exploitation, or then we have to go and do this thing that's pre-described and predetermined by our society as well.
Yeah.
Um, and allow for these. And that is where I think awareness comes in, so we can watch and developing this witnessing side of ourselves and watch, so that if someone does feel some amount of discomfort or something doesn't feel safe, then we stop. We
Mm.
respect people's boundaries. So this is also always 100% about consent.
Mm. I want to touch in on that consent piece for a second. But I also want to say one thing that's really feels so potent about what you're sharing. And something I have begun to think about more, I think what because of the clown school and because of the improv that's a part of that, is all of the ways in which we are who we are or who we can be in a moment in our bodies and with each other is constrained. And
Mm.
these ways are so insidious. They're so subtle. Like even when you were talking about the movement, like moving your pelvis in a certain way, or like how we might meet each other and you go like this and I go like that, whatever. Um, right. But like all of the ways, and I think about this a lot because something that I've been reflecting on as I'm going through this clowning is just realizing, and I have to admit, I'm a very silly, goofy person, human being. Like, when I'm at the grocery store with my daughter, I'm doing like Ministry of Silly Walks style kind of, and I'm like, would you still love me? Would you still want to be seen with me if I was like, and I'll just be like, and I'll make noises and like, and this was before clown school. So I always knew that there was there was a clown in there
Yes.
that someone who knows how to be silly and have fun. And like I often sing opera in my house with my husband. He loves opera. I don't actually love opera. So therefore I will just sing opera very loudly in the house about the day or whatever. Or anyway, but I'm noticing how outside of a space that feels safe for me to be that way, all of the ways that I shut down in other spaces, right? And literally at levels that really kind of stun me, if I'm honest. Like, um, if I'm given instruction in class to do something, and of course in clowning you're offered guidance on something to do, but the invitation is you're set up to fail basically every single time you're given some instruction to do something. You're set up to fail. You don't have enough time, you don't have enough guides, so you're going to like fail fabulously, right? But I'll
Right.
find myself adhering to some preconceived idea, my own likely, of what is expected in this moment. And this is only a realization now after doing it for some time and realizing how often it shows up. And it shocked me actually to realize how many times I'm like, you know, planning or preparing something I'm going to do, or based on the invitation that's given. And I'm trying to conform to some expectation of what that thing might be or what it should look like or what should be funny and what isn't. It's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And I'm not free. I am not free
Oof.
in those moments. I'm not free.
Yeah. So I lived off grid for a few years and I did some really deep work on myself. I completely unplugged from society and I went into a bit of a ego disillusion and really connected to the land. And this was before my grandmother's hands had been written.
Mhm.
So I was doing some deep ancestral work and contacted and faced and processed a lot of this shame through my body. And when I came out, the first thing I'd like broken up with my boyfriend. So I moved back to the city and I needed some love and some healing. And I joined a comedy group. And there's a woman in town who teaches comedy workshops to explicitly women, non-binary, and trans folks. And so what I learned is that even comedy and stand-up comedy and the way that it's performed in the world is largely done by men and for men. It's a particular
Mm.
style of humor. And I thought that
Hmm.
was really interesting.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So comedy as another expression of like another art form, how to make people laugh, how to bring people together, how to connect people, um, is I think super important for just being human and also feeling free to be ourselves. And finding out what humor is and what is the range of ways that we can make one another laugh and laugh together. I think that's an interesting proposal. Um, and that was extremely liberating for me to learn how to laugh and to be more and more comfortable letting myself laugh out loud, letting myself in a public space just be loud and laugh and feel that joy and expression running through my body. I think that also gets confined in us.
Yeah.
Just our, not only our vulnerability, our anger, our rage, but our joy and our laughter. Or if you're a girl, this is how you make people laugh. And if you're a guy, this is how you make people laugh. No, there's infinite ways to laugh and to tickle one another's fancy, and to enjoy space one together.
Hmm.
So um, I also found a lot of play in drag. That was a new form of art form that I had never experienced before. I started watching drag shows and it took a while. I was like, I'm interested in this. How can this help me feel more free? That's what we're trying to talk about. How can we feel free without causing harm to others?
Mm.
And without causing so much harm to the earth, too. Feel free to be ourselves. And so taping my tits down was one of the most freeing and empowering things I've ever done. Feeling those mammary glands, just get those mammary glands out of the way for a second. And man, did I access my sexuality. My masculine side comes out and I have a little package that I wear now. And what a beautiful form of play, expression, laughter. The audience loves drag. And we love drag because we love comedy because we love flipping these things upside down and seeing our male friends dress up in skirts. It's hilarious. We love it. It's it's a I think it's just like a necessary part of human experience to let all these different sides of ourselves out in ways that are safe and healthy.
Yeah.
Um,
And we have ritual and ceremony around that, don't we? I mean, this idea of dressing up, even dressing in drag, this can go back, you can trace that back thousands of years, actually, right? There are cultures, there are ceremonies that have really celebrated that ability to express maybe what feels in kind of the everyday life unexpressible. Right?
yes,
The full range of our human experience and the other aspects of our human experience that are constrained in certain ways get to
right,
have these
right,
periods of expression, right? This is very I agree with completely. It feels very fundamental to um yeah, to what it means to be human in this world. And I mean, even things like Carnival, um
yes,
are and Halloween,
yes,
are expressions of this. I always loved
absolutely.
Halloween for that reason. I think there's something um so powerful. I would love it. I just what was Halloween? Yes, the day before yesterday, right? And I'm on a call in the morning and I look out the window and there's a unicorn walking a dog outside my window. And I'm and I swear to you, Heidi, nothing could make me happier. Nothing. Nothing. I screeched and I ran to the window and I was like, there's a unicorn walking a dog. There's a unicorn walking a dog. This is the best day ever. I mean, the best day ever. I'm someone who really loves yeah, what this kind of probing of the veil that takes place with days like that
Mm,
and in experiences like that. I love your example of drag and yeah, the freedom that it opens up in us. The absurd,
Yeah.
the weird, the absurd. I long for the absurd in my life. I really do.
And I wish, if we culturally had more parades and more things that we could design them and we could co-create them ourselves. We don't need to steal from another culture. We can look within ourselves and find our own weirdness from within, and our own
Yeah.
relationship to the dead, our relationship to death, our relationship to those who have passed, taking on some of their characteristics and playing around with them and playing with one another, just more play. And
Yeah.
I think what scares us is that partially, potentially, is that will contact our shame and we'll contact our vulnerability as we play and open up these channels. And that's then we need safe space to grieve, and
Yeah.
and and safe space to process stuff that happened to our ancestors, and that's different for each of us as well.
Yeah.
But
I
there
love
also might be some similarities between us too.
I just wanted to say about the shadow. Um, I think it is a feature of modernity that
Right.
the shadow is banned, right? I often
Yes.
and I
The
often
shadow is
wonder, the
banned.
shadow is banned, the shadow is banned. And I often wonder when I think about clowning, because the clown is so kind of dances on the board boundary all the time. The clown is, as especially as trickster, right, is always
Yes.
kind of dancing on that boundary between kind of chaos and order, and always
Right.
introducing a little bit of chaos in the order. There and
Right.
because it plays so much with the shadow, I often wonder if that's part of what has made us culturally so intrigued with the clown as this terrifying figure. For a lot of people, their fear is the clown. And I become so endlessly curious about how that might relate to the extent to which we are imposing some control and a
Right.
disavowal of of the shadow, of the shadows
Yeah.
within us, the cultural shadows, right? The things that
Yes.
culturally we are not wanting or willing to see, and so we do not like
Right.
anything that reminds us that they're there, that they're
Yeah.
there, that
That's
these disruptions, they're there. Chaos is there.
it's there. It's a part of who we are. It's inside of us. It's a part of nature. I went on a walk this morning. There's a little park just outside of my house, and it's not managed. It's probably just a block. It's a little tiny, tiny block nature preserve that this guy created, and it's not managed. And I was thinking of this talk with you and thinking about like perfection, our obsession with perfection, what you were talking earlier. I love that idea that the shadow is banned. I almost see it like behind closed doors and locked, and our obsession with light and electricity and like street lights everywhere and just light, 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 light. We're largely afraid to go walk in the woods in the dark now. And perfect lawns and looking perfect
Mm,
and never being messy and never having messes. And I walked on this path this morning, and the leaves are all decomposing and it's just kind of messy, and it's a necessary part of nature to compost
yeah,
and to be a little bit messy, and we
yeah,
can have room for all of it. But we need to have mess and turn things upside down on their head. That's so many cultures throughout time had a relationship to these tricksters and this
yeah.
trickster energy. It's
This is a
important to
it's
incorporate
cyclic.
it.
Yeah, is it creation and destruction? I mean, to make way for for new life, for creation, there has to be destruction. I mean, there are examples, like you're saying, literally everywhere we could look in the natural world, in the cosmic sphere, literally everywhere we could look. The birth of new stars always come from the destruction of old stars, right? In those beautiful nebulas that we love, those are the star nurseries. They're the remnants of former stars that have gone supernova. It's inherent, absolutely, to the cycle of life
And that's like
and death.
our psyche too. Parts of our psyche can die. And that
Yeah.
scares us. Um, we don't have a whole lot of experience with that yet, but we have all the tools culturally to do that kind of work together and with one another, um, just carefully and gently. And I wanted to share one other aspect of my journey. The trickster form came to me in the disability world. It was another thing that I did right after I came back from living off grid for those couple years, and I joined a improv all abilities improv group, and I had never done that before. So here we are again. I'm filled with judgments. I have all these preconceived ideas and notions, and so many people with disabilities are in this group, and people who don't like have disabilities, quote unquote, whatever. I mean, that's just a
Yeah, that's a
ridiculous
whole
binary
conversation.
that yeah, that's a whole, that binary I'm not into anymore, but I'm trying to leave it anyway, because I now have disabilities. But these people in this community taught me so much, and talk about trickster energy coming from just this innocence and beauty inside of people. And I think it's because for a lot of people that shame isn't so strong inside of them. So you're able to open up more and access kind of these weird goofy parts of yourself. And this
Mm,
obsession we have with not making mistakes, we're not allowed to make mistakes. I mean, we'll be canceled if we make a mistake, Karine.
I
There's a
know.
legitimate fear around making mistakes now that is just like, y'all, we're trying to change together. Many of us are. We don't know the way. We're gonna make mistakes. Failure is a part of this. Can we laugh about it instead? And laugh together. I know some mistakes we have to take seriously and cry about them, like you said. Um, I also prefer to cry and to feel pain in order to open up to a new idea and open up to a new perspective. So just wanting to add in the world of disability and how important that is, along with gender and race and everything else we've been talking about, to open ourselves up to new perspectives, and the way different people and different cultures and different perspectives can help us grow and learn and liberate, because we're doing it together.
Yeah. I love that so much,
Yep.
Heidi. Thank you for sharing that. It is really such a beautiful reflection. And if we're truly going to open up to that kind of pluriverse of experience, I mean, you're absolutely right. Without the mistakes, without the risking failure, and I hope we can fail. There's a definition of clowning that I heard, that the clowning is nothing but learning to celebrate failure in public.
Yes.
And I loved that. Um, I mean, what that actually looks like, I feel like we're experimenting with now. Like, how do we get there? Right. That's kind of like the grand experiment. I know there are spaces that are inviting that in. And so I'm curious, how are we doing that in ways, especially when we don't know each other, we don't
Right.
have
Yeah.
relationship first. I mean, and I
Right.
think it's part of building relationship. It's part of
Yeah.
it's part of the raw materials of what make relationship, um, is that
And also
ability
there
to
are,
make empathy. No, go ahead.
well, just that there really are people who aren't safe also.
In this world, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
absolutely,
um
absolutely.
There's
Absolutely.
some, you can't do this work with everyone,
Mm, mm,
in
mm.
my experience. Like, we're probably not going to talk about liberation with Elon Musk. Um, maybe that's an assumption I'm making.
Yeah, I don't know either, right? That is a question I think about a lot, actually, especially when we
Who
when we
knows?
talk about wanting to truly be a pluriverse, that would have to include, right, people who hold views or, positions that are so wildly different from ours. And how do we then still find each other in relationship? I think maybe in some version of what we're doing, we are working towards that. It's a road, though. It's a
Right.
long road and a journey, maybe not one that we achieve in this lifetime, but the creation of a care ecology, the intention behind that, and this idea of sacred hospitality, which is something that really appeals to me deeply, I mean, in theory, it would include all voices, all of them. How that looks, though, in a landscape where we are navigating, like you're saying, real harms, I don't know. That's why we're doing this together, isn't it? We're trying to figure that out, and we don't have the answers. We are just kind of step by step exploring this new terrain with a willingness and an open heart and curiosity, and rooted in values of respect and reverence and humility. And I feel like that's all I can possibly know at this point. Anything
Right.
beyond that is a mystery.
That's beautiful.
You're
Um,
beautiful, Heidi.
you're beautiful.
No, you are.
Another thing that has occurred to me in my process of making art with folks as a form of exploration and connection is that it doesn't use a lot of resources, or it doesn't have to use a lot of resources. So it's just something I've been curious about, that getting together for a couple hours and doing long form improv or contact improv or vocal improv or a drum, a music circle, or those things don't aren't super consumptive. And
Mm,
we're also not looking at one another to consume one another. So
mm,
that's also just been a cool, like, reframe for me, because a lot of the ways that we are called to relate inside of this global culture right now is still based on consuming. So that's just
mm.
a beautiful aspect of relating in these ways that are more about exploration as opposed to exploitation.
Ooh, oh, I can't end the conversation there. I want to hear more. I mean, I know we do have to kind of wrap things up. I know, but I'm so intrigued by this idea of consumption, um, and how, if I understand correctly, how you're saying kind of art making or kind of these improv, doing something like vocal improv with people is not about exploitation, but about creativity and expression, and it's not about consumption. And I'm curious, how do you feel like it how do you feel like it differs from, or how do you feel like it's not still rooted in this culture of consumption? How does it really tap into this non-exploitative creative arena that you're speaking of? Or can it ever become consumption?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I was initially just thinking of art in general, and art can always become consumption. And consumption and exploitation in and of themselves aren't bad things. I'm not saying that those are necessarily negative. We're always going to need wood to build our houses. And if we're going to a burlesque show and a drag show and I'm seeing somebody hot on stage, I'm going to be like, oh, you are sexy, you are fine, and I'm really enjoying how my body is feeling right now looking at you. But there's this next level, I think, that happens with, like, Amazon. It's like we're all on Amazon and we feel a little bit, we can use one another. And I feel like capitalism really can play into that. to a degree that can be harmful, and to a degree to where we aren't seeing the other person's humanity anymore,
Yeah.
and seeing that they have value and a life and lineages. And like you're saying, each individual is an infinite universe to get to know.
Yes.
And that part of it, I've noticed, when I'm spending 2 hours doing a long form comedy improv workshop, I'm working my brain, I'm working my body, I'm developing connections, but we're not necessarily buying anything. We're not extracting resources from the earth, tons of resources, in order to have fun together. So, not to say I'm not making a value judgment, just saying that some forms of connection, entertainment, can be less extractive and less exploitative than others, and allow us to connect more authentically with one another and to care about the earth at the same time.
I love that, especially how often I know that I have felt in different spaces or in different places out in the world, this more transactional way of relating to each other in a capitalist economy, right? That the way that it translates is, for example, many years ago when I was studying anthropology, I would go to these anthropology conferences, right? And I remember the feeling I would get oftentimes in these spaces. It would be very strange to me. I would always be very excited to be there. I was curious to like talk to other people who are really passionate about kind of all of the things that I was passionate about when it came to anthropology, which is kind of like making sense of our worlds, right? This was my impulse to be there. And you would start a conversation with someone and suddenly you were feeling like they were assessing where you were on the, in the
Oh,
scheme of it, you know what I mean? Like, did you have a high
totally.
influential position or
Yes.
were you a meaningless?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then the
Oh,
moment
yes.
they
This
realize
is
that you're
great.
not a person of significance, they're starting to look over your shoulder as you're talking and you're like, this is really strange. I'm just excited to speak with other human beings um about what from our lives draws us into a field of this. And other people are kind of, it felt like a strategic chess game where people were trying to like, and now you are a pawn piece of little significance. You are put to the side. And suddenly it doesn't matter how interesting your conversation is or how passionate you are. It's not important. And it was heartbreaking. So the non-transactional nature of art making is so intriguing to me.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Ah, that's what I love about artists. Heidi, you are really truly a joy to be with. Thank you for your beautiful wisdom and your heart and your authenticity and for sharing everything that you did today. I'm wondering before we say goodbye, if there's anything else you'd like to share.
Here's a little song.
Yes.
I see you, you see me. We all just want to be free. We love the earth and we pink free, squatting underneath the cottonwood tree. You do you, and I'll do me. I won't manipulate you. Please don't manipulate me. It's all right. Sometimes we'll disagree. Words and actions align with authenticity. I love you, Karine. I
Right
love you
back
so
at
much.
you. I love you too,
Thank you
Heidi.
so much for this opportunity and conversing with you and continuing to get to know you. And thank you for all that you're doing and undoing and supporting
Thank
in this
you.
world, and for your heart and your love.
Thank you so much, Heidi. And likewise, truly, truly, it is such a joy to get to know you. And I know you've been a part of Rooted for a long time, and I appreciate you deeply. So thank you today and for your time. And I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining us today. We don't take for granted what it means to dedicate your time and energy to us. So thank you for listening. And if you're curious to learn more about what we get up to in Rooted, check out rootedglobalvillage.com or follow us on Instagram at tending.the.roots. Be well.